Hi, welcome to Cornelia Unravels, a knitting podcast. I'm quite nervous and maybe this is never going to see the light of day, but we'll see how we go. So my name is Cornelia. You may hear my cat Jemima scratching in the background, and who knows, I'm probably going to have my dog Watson run through the door at some point in time while I'm filming this too. I also have a cat named Susie, and I live with my husband and those animals in Melbourne, Australia. Like many other people, I have been thinking about making a knitting podcast for quite some time, but decided to bite the bullet and give it a go anyway. We'll see if I have any one view. I'm hoping on at least 2 people who will watch it, and then we'll see what happens after that. Speaking of Jemima, she has decided to join us up here behind the plant. We'll see if she comes and walks over all of my stuff that is spread out on the floor here. I have some very messy notes that I have written, so if I'm looking at them, I apologise, but I didn't trust myself to remember everything, especially the first time around. And I think I have probably forgotten some other things that are useful pieces of information, so I apologise if there is a piece of information that you are looking for. Feel free to just ask me if I have forgotten to tell you. My podcast is kind of going to follow the normal knitting podcast structure, I suppose. I do quite enjoy watching that myself. I kind of like a predictable structure. But I have a couple of other things that I'm going to try and add in or do slightly differently just to put my own stamp on it. I am finding it very difficult to look at the camera part instead of at myself on the screen. So again, I apologise if I am looking anywhere and everywhere. So a little bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Cornelia. I live in Melbourne, Australia with my 3 animals, 2 cats, 1 dog, and my husband. At the moment, my mum is staying with us. She lives in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand. She's outside in the garden at the moment. I told her she needed to go somewhere she couldn't hear me, and my husband is down the other end of the house working, so hopefully I can do this with minimal embarrassment, though I'm sure I'm going to make them watch this first before it goes anywhere public where other people can see it. So, should we get started? Let's start with finished objects. So, the first finished object I have to share with you is this one here. It's very exciting. So I had a really fantastic opportunity to test knit this. This is only my 2nd test knit, and I do have mixed feelings about doing a test knit. I'm not one to enjoy knitting to a deadline, but I still signed up for it anyway. I didn't quite meet the test knit deadline, though I did provide feedback and I did have all parts of the pattern knit in some way by the point that feedback was needed, but I didn't actually finish the garment until the release day or the day before the release day. So I was able to share photos with the designer and I guess fulfill my part in that way, but unfortunately I didn't quite finish it exactly on the deadline. So this is called the Letters from the Open Road, and it is a jacket designed by Jen Parroccini. I apologise if I have said your name wrong, who is JP Knits Things on Instagram. Now this jacket is knit in pieces and is a little bit hard for me to hold. I will tell that story in a second. It took me a long time and I was spending quite a lot of time on it, but still I think it's a really amazing pattern, and I definitely am happy that I spent the time test knitting this, even though test knitting and knitting to a deadline can be a little bit stressful. So I'll try to post some finished object photos up here, but it is a really, really lovely jacket. So pop that over there. My second finished object, now I'm doing this in order of the jacket I finished longest ago, not too long ago, but longest ago. So then the next object I finished after that was this sweater here, which I knew I was going to forget things. So the yarn for the jacket. I used this yarn here, which is, try and show you the tag. It is Mamawooling hand dyed yarn. Now she's based in New Zealand. This is her Plush fingering base, which is an 85-15. It's really nice and squishy, and it is in the colorway Vanilla Bean Cream. And for the welts, I used mini skeins from Happy Hank Co. She had a whole set of mini skeins that were based on different Wes Anderson movies. So this one is based upon the Grand Budapest Hotel. So that's the mini skeins. I don't have the tag anymore, so I can't remember the fiber content. I think maybe 75-25. But that's the yarn I used for this pattern. Right, back to the second finished object. So this here is the Doocot Sweater, and it is by Kate Davies. I really love this pattern just purely because of the rib on the sleeves and on the bottom. Hopefully you can, yeah, there we go. The bottom of the sweater. I just thought it was a really lovely detail because otherwise it's a pretty simple raglan top-down sweater. This one, I'll remember the yarn this time. This one is knit in the 100 Acre Wool colorway by Hickory Lane Fibre Co. And it is just in her, yes, in her DK Superwash Merino base. So it's a really lovely color, and if you know Winnie the Pooh, you can see all of the different colors of the different characters. Personally, Eeyore is my favorite, so I like all of the little gray flecks that remind me of Eeyore, but you can see Piglet and Winnie the Pooh and Kanga. So it's a really fun yarn, and I liked how when it knit up, it even though it's a very speckled colorway, it does read quite neutral. So hopefully I'll get a lot of wear out of this. It's not cold enough to be wearing something like this yet, so I haven't worn it. I've just tried it on. I didn't do a gauge swatch for this one, and needle size is something that I forgot to write down for each of my patterns, so hopefully I will remember to do that for next time. All right, now my third finished object, I forgot to mention a couple of other things. So this is going to be long just because I'm going to forget things. So for this sweater, I knit the 5th size. I used 4 skeins and a half. So I had 50 grams left over from my last skein, and I wanted to knit it longer, but I didn't really read ahead in the pattern. This is a common thing that I don't do, is read to the end of the pattern. So I knit the body an inch longer from the underarm than it said to, and then realized that the ribbing was actually supposed to be longer than I thought. So in the end, I've ended up with the body 1 inch longer than the pattern calls for, and the ribbing 1 inch shorter, and the length of it is exactly what it was supposed to be anyway. So whoopsies, but it's turned out really lovely and I'm really happy with it. And my last finished object, after I had finished both of those, I was looking for a bit of a quick project rather than a really long one. And I have this pom-pom. Oh, I thought it was over there. I've put it right in front of me. I have this lovely brown pom-pom. It's just made with fake fur, and it is from, I can't remember. I will try and put that somewhere for you here or in the description box or somewhere where I buy most of my pom-poms from. She is in Australia. So I have this lovely pom-pom, and in my head I thought it would be perfect with a white cabled hat. So that was my plan, find a white cabled hat to go with the pom-pom. So this is what I have made. As you can see, it is a white cabled hat. However, I have knit it too small. I did knit the biggest size, but it is too small for me. So unfortunately, this hat will need to find a new home, and I will need to be finding another hat to go with my pom-pom. However, the pattern is really lovely. It is called the Dorothy Hat, and the designer of the hat is Claire Walls, who is Flossy Knits on Instagram. Now, I did knit the second size, which was the largest size, and I also, I need to trim that a little bit shorter, knit the ribbing a little bit longer than the pattern called for. It's both too short and too tight, so I'll pop it on for you. I feel like it looks a little bit comical, but it has been blocked and it's just not quite what I'm looking for. So now I've messed up my hair. This hat will have to find a new home, but it is very lovely nonetheless. I knit this in this colorway, which I think is just an undyed colorway. However, it was named Fastpass, and it was from Sewrella's Disneyland collection. So I believe it is just an undyed yarn, and it is in Sewrella's classic worsted, which is just a superwash merino worsted weight yarn. So those are my 3 finished objects, and we will move into works in progress. So now we will move into works in progress. I have 2 main works in progress at the moment. I have plenty more works in progress that are, I guess, in timeout or I haven't touched for a while, but these are the 2 that I have been knitting on in the last week or so. So those are the ones that I will share, and I'm going to have a different segment later on, which is going to talk about one of my less active works in progress. Now, I didn't mention earlier, I will try to put all of the information that I have talked about in the description box. Maybe I'll have something on the screen. I haven't quite worked that bit out. I just thought I'll get the filming done, and then I will work out what happens when I try to edit this and put it all together. So my first work in progress is a birthday present for my mum. I have already knit her, I think, 3 pairs of socks. She was gifted them all last year. Some she knew about, some she didn't, and I knit myself a pair of socks. I knit all the Frills Socks by Summerlee Designs, and she really liked those socks. So she's come over here for a few weeks to visit, and I said to her that I would knit her a pair of birthday socks because it is her birthday this Saturday. Now, I don't think I'm going to get the socks finished by this Saturday. As you will see, I haven't made a lot of progress, but the deal is that I will at least finish them by the time she goes home. So, this is her pair tiny cuff of all the Frills Socks. As I mentioned, it is by Summerlee Designs, and it comes in, I'm not sure if it's a pattern on its own, but it does come in one of her shorty sock set patterns. So she has quite a lot of bundles available that group together similar patterns. So this pattern comes within one that has a number of patterns for shorty socks. So as you can see, get that out of the way, it is knit in this lovely blue color. It probably looks a bit brighter on the camera. It's probably a little bit more of a tealy aqua color as opposed to quite as bright a blue. I did pick the spot in my house because I thought that it would have the best light. I have only got the cuff so far. I'm knitting the cuff a little bit longer than the pattern calls for. Mum's tried my socks on and has decided that she would like her cuff just a little bit longer. She is planning on wearing them when she goes cycling, and I think they'll fit her shoes a little bit better. They are being knit, as you can see, on 9-inch circular needles, and I am using a, let's see, a Progress Keeper, which is by Hello Lavender Designs. Sorry, my hand is shaking. A piece of advice that I didn't take for knitting these socks. When I knit the first pair, I knit them on 9-inch circular needles, and I got through the cuff and thought, or through the frill at the top, sorry, and thought, next time I knit a pair of these socks, because I do love them, they're super cute, I am going to start with magic loop, and then I'll change to 9-inch circular needles when I get to the cuff ribbing. Well, I decided to cast on these socks, and I thought, no, it'll be fine, I can't be bothered starting on magic loop and changing over. I will just start them on 9-inch circular needles, and instantly regretted it. It's a lot of stitches for the ruffle to be on 9-inch circular needles, and when you decrease to start the cuff, you need to knit really tightly so that the frill doesn't end up too loose, and that means that just my hands were getting a little bit sore. So if you knit these socks, I highly suggest that if you like 9-inch circular needles, start them on magic loop and then change over. And next time I knit these, because I'm sure I will knit a third pair, I will follow my own advice this time. So that's where I'm up to on the first sock. And the yarn that I'm using, this is the ball. Now let me see, that's a bit better. It is in a little ball like this. Sorry, I was pulling out cat fur. In a little ball like this because this was ripped out of a project that I had started a long time ago, and it just wasn't me anymore. So I don't know what the colorway is, but I do know that it is Hedgehog Fibres in their twist sock base, which is their BFL base. But yes, I'm not sure what the colorway is, but it's not necessarily my favorite to knit with, but when it's blocked, it's really lovely. And my second work in progress doesn't really look like much yet, but that's okay. This is going to be the zipper Slipover, which is by Petite knit. Now, this so far is just part of the ribbing. Maybe I'll put a pattern photo up here so that you can see what it looks like. But basically, it is a has a ribbed collar that's quite long, folded over, and then has the zip in the front and has nice short sleeves. So far all I have is the ribbing for the neckline. So I'm not all the way yet. I still have a bit to go before I do what comes next. I needed to relearn how to do Judy's Magic Cast On in order to start this. So that was fun, learning a new technique and having a little bit of a challenge. So the stitches on my top needle are my active stitches, and these ones down the bottom are just on hold. And like I said, I don't really read ahead in patterns. I know you're supposed to. I know it always says read the entire pattern before you start. So when I get to it, I'll work out what I'm supposed to do with both sets of stitches. These, I can tell you what needles I'm knitting with. I am using 4.5mm needles for the ribbing at the moment. I did do a gauge swatch, and I have chosen to go up a needle size and knit a size up because of not getting gauge. Now I'm confused as to whether or not that sounds right, but I'm kind of winging it, and I'm just going to see what happens, and we'll see if it fits me or not. I'm using this yarn here, which is a DK non-superwash merino, and I purchased it as an undyed skein and dyed this one myself. and I am holding it with this yarn here, which is Cumulus by Fyberspates. It is 74% baby Suri alpaca, 26% mulberry silk, and it is in the raindrop colorway, which is also color 917. So that's how they look in the cake or skein together, and then this is how they are knitting up together. Again, it looks a little bit brighter than what it does in real life, but it's been fun to knit so far. I think it's going to be super squishy, especially once it's folded over. It's going to be really nice and thick. So the next part of my podcast I am going to title Other Knits and Pieces, because who doesn't like a bit of a cheesy pun? Now in here I am going to, at the moment, talk about an older whip that is sitting in a bag waiting for me to work on it. I'm hoping that this will I guess motivate me a little bit to work on it and be able to show you it sooner rather than later as an active whip with some actual progress on it. And I'm also going to show you, and this is inspired by my friend Karen, who is knitting and Labradors. She has been showing some of her Scrappy Blanket progress, again as a little bit of a motivator, on her end of month podcast. So I thought this might be a good place to put a little bit of a Scrappy Blanket update if I have been working on one. So my first thing that I'm going to share with you in this segment is going to be my active, not anymore active, was active, work in progress. Now this is in, my other ones weren't in a bag. This is in a bag from Petite Knits. She is based here in Melbourne as well. I now have three of her bags. They are really lovely quality. They're just a drawstring bag and have some, might be hard to see, nope, you can see them, pockets on the inside as well, and are quilted. This is hard to see because it's a darker coloured fabric, but you can kind of see the cat fur, but also that the bags are quilted, so you can see the stitching on them. So they're really lovely and they're great quality. So I highly recommend her if you are in the market for a bag. Obviously, if you're overseas, maybe a little bit much postage, but if you happen to be here in Australia, definitely get one from her. So housed in this bag is my, I forgot to check if I was halfway through a row or not. Fortunately, I'm not. Now, this is my Advent shawl that I started at the end of 2021, and is the Advent that I put, one of the Advents, I purchased 2 last year, that I purchased for 2021. So this Advent was from Beehive Yarns. Now, an Advent calendar or a yarn calendar is something created by yarn dyers for people to count down to Christmas or whatever they choose to count down to. They're traditionally created for a countdown until Christmas, but obviously people celebrate lots of different things, so they can be used for whatever you would like to. So this is the one that was purchased from Beehive Yarns. So these are the first 3 days heading into the 4th day, and this is the Solstice Engrain shawl by, let me double check her name, Sarah Opie, and she is s.knits on Instagram. Now she designed this shawl for the Explore Knits and Fibres winter solstice countdown calendar that she created last year. However, my Advent, the Advent was supposed to be a fade. My Advent was also supposed to be a fade, so I decided it would be a good project to use. There's just a mess of mini skeins in here. Whoop! It's not working very well. Maybe we won't do that. We'll cut that little bit out. So, as you can see, it starts with the kind of burgundy purple going into pinks. It'll then go into sort of these rusty browns, going into more deeper browns, and then it, at the end of the advent, fades into blues and finishes off with a couple of greeny colours. So I'm not too far into it. As I said, I am only up to about day 3 going into day 4, but this is something that I would like to pick up again soon. Even my husband, whose name is Dean, asked me the other day, he's like, when are you going to knit that advent shawl? So I thought this would be a good featured project. And I also appreciate, even though this is kind of a Christmassy bag, I've kept it in there because I appreciate how much my yarn matches the bag. I quite enjoy that. So hopefully, now that I have shared that on this podcast, that's hopefully going to see the light of day somewhere, this will give me a little bit of accountability, and I will actually start working on it, and you will see it as a current whip instead of a in time out whip. So the other thing that I was going to share in my other knits and pieces segment is my scrappy blanket, or not so scrappy blanket as the case is for me. I love seeing other people's, don't get me wrong, but I personally really struggle with the idea of just picking a skein of yarn and putting it in a blanket and being happy with it. I tend to be a little bit fussier and like my colour palette to be a little bit more curated, I suppose. So in 2019 and 2020, I purchased the yarn calendar, advent calendar, whatever you'd like to call it, from Stress Knits Yarn, and I wasn't sure what to do with them. In the end, I decided on making a granny stripe blanket. So this blanket is, for the majority, going to be made up of Stress Knits Yarn yarn calendars. However, there are a few Mulberry Fibre Co mini skeins in here, there are a few Lavender Loon mini skeins in here, and I'm purchasing some of Stacey's garden club that she's doing this year, which is a mini skein club, to go in this blanket. So this is what it looks like at the moment. I haven't done a lot. It is quite, you can't see my wingspan, but this is my shoulder width, so it's probably 1, 2, 3, 4 shoulder widths wide, and probably not even 30 centimeters long at the moment. Again, I'm hoping that putting this in this segment will give me a little bit of motivation to work on this. Mentally, I kind of think, oh, it's not going to be too hard to put in a row a day, things like that, and then I just never get around to it. So I'm hoping that I will be able to put a little bit more work into this, because I do really love it. It's really beautiful, and I'm looking forward to it being a blanket that I can actually use for something. Now, one of the things I didn't mention in my other knits and pieces segment is that the reason I've called it that is because I am wondering if I will run out of whips that are in timeout or may not have a scrappy blanket update. So that's just a nice spot where I've got an opportunity to put in any other bits and pieces or knits and pieces that I would like to share with you. Sometimes I might give you a little bit of a yarn stash update. I will talk about my yarn stash in this upcoming segment and a little bit in my acquisition segment. But that's just kind of a segment where I've got an opportunity to choose what I would like to share with you, other little knitting bits and pieces in the other knits and pieces. My next segment that we are going to talk about is a stash feature or knitting plans, a little bit of both. So one of the things that I am trying to do this year, I know alongside many other people, it is something that I have heard lots in podcasts and seen mentioned a lot on Instagram posts about people wanting to use their stash this year instead of buying more yarn. I am another person who is aiming to do that as much as possible. I have set a little bit of a rule for myself, that is, I can buy yarn provided that it is to add to yarn that I already have in my stash, and therefore will be both using yarn in my stash alongside the newly acquired yarn in order to work together in a project, which I will talk about in acquisitions because I do have a few. So this segment of the podcast is going to be a bit of a stash feature where I choose some yarn from my stash that I'd like to share with you, alongside a little bit of future knitting plans. Now, the hope with this segment is that it just constantly reminds me of what I do have in my stash, and am therefore more motivated to use it and get excited about the projects that I do have planned for the lovely yarn that I do own. So the yarn that I have chosen to share with you today is this fade here. So this fade is by Beehive Yarn Co. Beehive Yarns, not Beehive Yarn Co. Beehive Yarns. She's based in the UK and is the person who I purchased the yarn calendar from last year. Now this fade here, I do have a sweater's quantity worth. I just didn't want to grab out all of the skeins. I didn't want to show you in the packet because it would be very crinkly. This fade here has been created to make a comfort fade cardigan by Andrea Mowry. So it's super pretty. It is one of the favorite things I have in my stash, and I think these colors, though I bought these I think last year, I think these colors are having a little bit of a moment for me. I have recently purchased some other yarn in some similar colors, and as you can see, it matches my bedding behind me. So this color here is called Tulle, and they're all in her Dolly base, which is her 100% superwash extra fine merino DK. So this is Tulle, which would fade into Nougat, which is super pretty and speckled, which would fade into Prairie Rose, and then Foxtails. So that's my little stash feature. I have enough to make the comfort fade cardigan in these yarns, and it is something that I am very excited to cast on. However, it's kind of one of those things that the yarn is too pretty for me to really want to cast it on, and it just sits there because it's just so pretty. So the last segment that is yarn related is going to be acquisitions, and then I'm not going to so much do a life update, maybe just a little bit of a chit chat about some things at the end. I know that a few people make this announcement at this point in time in their podcasts, so this can be the time. I do have a couple of acquisitions, so if you don't want to see what I got, I think there were just three things, maybe 4 things, but if you don't want to see that, I completely understand, and thank you for watching so far. But for those of you who do, let's get into the few things that I have purchased and what my plans are for them. Okay, so as I said, my aim is to stash down, and my purchases are to go with some yarn that I have in my stash. So in my stash I had some mohair that I thought would pair really nicely with this yarn I'm about to show you to make a terrazzo sweater by Petite Knit. She is having a little bit of a moment for me at the moment. I really like her patterns and am excited to knit a few of them. So this yarn here is Noro in the Silk Garden Sock Solo base. So I haven't knit with this yarn before. I'm excited to try it. As you can see, super colourful. Ooh, sorry, my hand is shaking. Now, the only problem is when I got this yarn, I paired it, looked at it with the mohair and thought, that's not going to work. I just need something like cream. So obviously my plan isn't infallible, and I'm going to need to get some cream now to go with this. But I'm still really excited to knit the sweater and see what it turns out like. This colorway is S1, which I think on the website I purchased it from was called Omitama, something along those lines. It doesn't say on the ball band, it just says S1, but I believe that was the colorway that it was called. Well, one of my other acquisitions I'm knitting with at the moment, which is this Cumulus by Fyberspates that I discussed, that I discussed earlier. So this I'm already using, but it is some yarn that I purchased recently, and it is what is in my zipper sweater. So it's an acquisition, but it is headed straight into a project, which is something that I discussed with Dean, my husband. He said you can buy new yarn, but when it arrives to you, you need to cast on straight away. So that means I might have a few new cast ons fairly shortly. The next acquisition I have is this Sadness Garn Tin Ratine Silk Mohair. I, again, got my, there we go, colour theme going on. Browns. I was very excited to try this. However, it is slightly scratchier than I thought it was going to be, and I'm not sure if it's going to be too scratchy for me. So I was going to knit a pullover with a higher neck. Because of how scratchy this is, I'm not sure that that will be that comfortable for me. So I may knit something along the lines of an oversized seasons cardigan by Ozetta, something that will go over top of clothes instead of being kind of up against my skin, especially my neck. So this did have a plan, but now that I have felt it in person, I'm kind of reassessing what that plan is. And my last acquisition, I'm actually going to pause this and take it out of the packet so that it's not too loud. So my last acquisition is this set of mini skeins here. Now, as I said, I have purchased the Stress Knits Yarn Garden Club. This is the first month she did, which was Feb, I believe, and each month she is doing colorways based on a flower. So this was her rose collection. March was daffodils, and I believe that April is going to be tulips. I haven't purchased that one yet, but I do have March ordered, and these are going to be going straight into my granny stripe blanket. So these acquisitions also have a plan. My last little section, I guess a lot of people do a bit of a life chat. I don't know that I have a lot of interesting things that I do. I like to have brunch. I like to knit, obviously, and play board games. So I did think that, obviously, if this doesn't interest you, that's totally fine. I thought that I might mention every so often a board game that I have been playing with my currently family, with my husband and my mum, since she's here visiting at the moment. But usually just my husband and I play together. Sometimes we have some people over that play with us. But one of the games that we have been playing recently is this one here, which is called the Quacks of Quedlinburg. It is I think it's a very fun game, and my mum really enjoys it as well. And I guess she's not a board gamer. She's gonna laugh when she sees this. We make her play board games whenever she comes here, and she very grudgingly agrees, but she's been enjoying it playing this one. So basically the premise of this game is where you are creating a potion on a board. You have got all of these little bits and pieces that are your potion ingredients. You are pulling them out of a bag and you are placing them in your cauldron, I suppose you could call it, and then you are, it's called a push your luck game, so you're trying not to bust, you're trying not to push your luck too far. Otherwise, if you do, you end up losing out on points or money, and you're trying to get the most points. So it's a bit of a laugh. It's funny having a giggle with each other around the table, trying to decide if you're going to keep going, if you're trying and get further than the person who is next to you. And it's been something that we have really been enjoying. It's pretty beginner friendly, so if playing board games beyond Monopoly is something that is interesting to you, then maybe this is one that you could have a little try. Obviously this is not knitting related, but I just thought it might be fun to share another interest with you every so often, and knitting is a big one, but board games is the other one. My board game stash is maybe on par with my knitting stash. I don't really know, but they're probably close to each other. We do have a large board game shelf, just like I have a large knitting shelf. So Quacks of Quedlinburg is something that I have really been enjoying playing this week. I think we've already played it about 4 times in the last few days, so that's been something that's been really great, and my husband got me some extra exciting pieces to upgrade the game for my birthday recently, so I guess that's been another reason to play it, to get to play with the new pieces. So hopefully you have enjoyed my podcast. I don't know how often I will film. Maybe every 2 weeks would be my guess, given how much knitting I would get done. Over the next few weeks I can get a bit more done, but following that I might slow down a little bit on the knitting front. So I will, I guess, aim to film every 2 weeks. Watson's about to come inside. Hello. Are you going to come say bye-bye? Yeah. And if you have any feedback for me, that would be fantastic. Apparently I've got a parrot dog. You can leave them in the comments below. This is my first podcast though, and it is a nice thing to be kind to people. So if you do have constructive feedback for me, that would be amazing, but please be kind in the way that you deliver that feedback. And hopefully I will see you again. So thank you for watching Cornelia Unravels-A knitting podcast. Bye. Why did it start? As predicted, I was just interrupted by the dog flying through the door. So this is Knit in Pieces. I think that was where I was up to, and is a little bit hard to hold up, as I will tell the story in a second. So it is knit in seed stitch. What are you doing? Watson? What are you doing? You can come say hi. You can come say hi. Yeah, you say hi. And then you go back outside and leave me alone? No. No, you're not going to do that, are you? Are you? You're going to be on the YouTube. You're going to be on the YouTube.